angels, it's Hailey Reese, and today's video is really exciting for me because I am coming back in with yet another personal paranormal experience from my childhood. And this is one that I've actually referenced in the past. Many of you have been requesting and actually asking me if I've made a video on this particular experience yet. So much so, I actually started to question, wait, have I told this story before or have I not? And I went through my videos and it appears that I have only quickly referenced this story. I have never fully told it. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the story of the time that I was basically tormented by a particular entity in my home. Before we get into today's video though, I would just very quickly like to thank today's video sponsor, Secret Escapes. Secret Escapes is a travel booking website that has amazing flash deals, saving up to 70% off for exclusive members. Now, what I really like is that the travel experts are real people rather than automated websites or algorithms. And these experts find you the best possible deals. You can book a trip last minute or up to 6 months in advance, and it's completely free to become a member. So all you gotta do is click the link in my description, enter your email, and take advantage of the amazing deals and offers. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video, and without further ado, let's dive right on into this story. For those of you who aren't familiar, I actually grew up in a haunted house, but today's story is a little bit different because this is an experience that I had not within my haunted house, but within the home that my mom would purchase after we left my grandparents' house. For me, majority of my childhood was actually within my grandparents' home, and whenever I think of my childhood home, I constantly remember, and all of my memories are associated to my grandparents' house, which was my haunted house. But after living with my grandparents for quite some time, my mom actually went out and got us our own home that we would move into, and she was so excited to have this home and to be able to make it everything that we could ever want. This home was big. It had a massive basement that we were gonna turn into a playroom for my sister and I. It had a 1/4 acre backyard, and it's pretty rare to find a yard that big right within the city. It was right next to my school. It was right near all of my friends, and I was so excited to have this big giant basement of my own where I could put all of my toys and all of my sister's toys and really just have like our own kids space. So we moved in, and automatically the basement was being set up to kind of become, like I said, that kids space. We would have this one section of the basement that had our TV and our couch and all of that jazz. And then moving backwards, we had like an arts and crafts area. To the right, we had desks that we would do our homework and things on, and eventually get like those big giant computers. And all of our toys were everywhere. It was just like the dream basement, and we were so excited to have such a fun space that we could kind of mess around in and just be kids. Very quickly though, I began to realize that something felt really off to me about that basement. There was something about the basement that felt very cold. And that's a very common thing in basements in general. Basements are typically cold. That's not a surprise. That's not really anything that's like, oh yeah, must be haunted. But this type of cold that I would feel when I was in the basement was cold to your core. It wasn't necessarily cold in the sense of like, turn up the heat. It was cold like no matter what, you always had the chills down there. You always felt a little bit off. Now, in the beginning, whenever I would have my sister down there with me, my mom down there with me, my grandma down there with me, or any of my friends with me, I was able to play and have a good time down there. But the minute that I was down there alone, for even a minute, I started to get this really bad feeling of being watched, this really off feeling of somebody else being down there, so much so that I would sometimes think that there was like a killer or somebody living in the basement, hiding in all of like the other electrical rooms and the other bedrooms and bathroom that I didn't really use that often. You guys know when you feel that feeling of being watched and you feel it so strong that you honestly think that there's something there. And that was the way that I started to feel very early on anytime I was alone in this basement. It got to the point where I felt so off down there alone that if I forgot a toy down there or I had to grab my homework from down there, no matter the time of day, I would grab what I needed and run as fast as I could because I would feel like something was chasing me. And I would feel like something was chasing me in the way that a lot of kids do, but also in the way that it felt so real that I would get upstairs and physically feel ill from how scared and how quickly I ran up those stairs. It wasn't until one day I had to go downstairs and retrieve something from the basement that things would shift and change for the worse for me. So I remember I went downstairs and I went to go and grab whatever it is that I was grabbing. I can't remember, but I started to get that sense and that feeling of being watched. So naturally, I grabbed what I could grab as quickly as possible and I ran up the stairs, but this time, out of nowhere in my peripheral vision, I saw what looked to be a frowning, scowling woman chasing after me. I saw it so much so that I actually stopped in shock, dead in my tracks, and turned around to see that nothing was there. It was so there in my peripheral vision that I truly believed that something or somebody really was, in fact, chasing me. That was kind of the start of seeing whatever or whoever this was in my peripheral vision and starting to see it more so as something really there rather than just a feeling. I was super terrified of what I believed to be this woman in the basement. And this was really odd behavior for me because I had previously lived in a haunted house for the longest time. I had had so many paranormal experiences. I had had so many ghostly encounters. I was so accustomed to it that it wasn't in my nature to be so afraid. But there was something about this specific entity, this specific spirit, that gave me a really off feeling in my stomach. And the only other time at this point in my life that I'd ever really felt that was when I was going through my Bloody Mary phase and I was seeing that woman in the mirror. I sound so insane when I tell these stories. It feels so weird to be back sharing my personal experiences because I feel like people are gonna be like, okay, Hailey, but take it for what it is. I was a small child. You can either believe it or not. This is just my recollection. So things began getting progressively worse. I started to see this spirit in my peripheral vision quite often, and it slowly got to the point where I no longer spent any time in the basement. I was so afraid of the basement. I was so tired of feeling like I was being watched, of having to run up the stairs, of playing down there, but not really playing because I couldn't shake the feeling of being so scared down there, that eventually I just stopped going to the basement entirely. The only time I would go down to the basement was when I would have friends over, because if I had friends over, it didn't feel so scary down there. And I found that if I had people over, whatever that was didn't seem to come around. That was when things kind of took a turn for the worse and became, in a sense, torturous because I could no longer escape it. For quite some time, it was just if I went to the basement that I would have these experiences. Whatever she was, whatever the energy was down there, it really tended to keep itself down in the basement, and it was kind of just like associated or stuck in that space of the house. But slowly but surely, I began having a really hard time sleeping. And I would wake up every single night. I can't say whether or not it was at the same time. I was so young, I don't recall. But I remember I would wake up and all of a sudden have that really off feeling of being watched. I would have that really unsettling feeling of something being in my room. I would get really cold to the core. I would get paranoid to the point where I'm just waiting for something to pop up. My feet couldn't hang over the ledge. All of that stuff that children experience, I was doing. And I had never been one to feel this way ever. Then one night, and I will never ever forget this, I woke up with that same horrible feeling, except this time I heard what sounded like whispers coming up the stairs. I should note my bedroom was at the very top of the stairs. My sister and I would swap rooms like throughout our childhood, but at this point in time, I was the very first room at the top of the stairs. And I remember my bedroom door was closed, but I could hear what sounded like whispers coming up the stairs through the door. So automatically, I pulled the blankets over my head and I began hiding under them because, you know, blankets can keep anything away. And I remember I just laid there until I heard what sounded like somebody shuffling to right next to the side of my bed. And I'm under the blankets and I'm trying so hard to like control my breathing so that if it's an intruder or whatever it is, my breathing isn't there and they won't know because, you know, they wouldn't see the outline of a child under the blankets. But I remember I was just laying there, and I couldn't shake the feeling of somebody actually being there. Eventually it got to the point where I thought, is my sister in here? Is my mom in here? So I decided that I was going to lift the blankets and I was going to look and see who or what was in there, because I knew for a fact something was, and some time had passed and it wasn't going away. So very slowly I began pulling down the blankets, and that is when I saw right above my face the scowling woman hovering, standing above my bed. I immediately pulled the blankets over my head, began screaming and crying. My mom came running in, flicked the light on, and to her surprise, nothing was there. And I was so frustrated with the fact that I was the only one seeing this woman. Over time, these happenings kept getting progressively worse, or actually, I wouldn't say progressively worse, more so they were becoming more and more consistent. I was having these visions of this woman in my peripheral vision, and I was waking up to someone standing and hovering over my bed and always scowling, always angry. It was not a kind, welcoming presence. It was very angry at something, and I felt as a child it was very angry at me. Over time, my mom realized that this wasn't something that I was going to get over, that now I couldn't even avoid the basement. It was something that was happening all the time for me, and I was so frustrated and so upset with being scared in my own home, I would go and sleep all the time at my grandparents', which, bear in mind, was a haunted house filled with spirits, but at least these ones felt comfortable. At least these ones weren't torturing me in the sense that I couldn't get any sleep and I couldn't go play with my toys and I couldn't do anything. At this point, my mom realized, like I said, that this wasn't something that was just going to go away, and so she had somebody come into our home and sage and cleanse the energy. And interestingly enough, when this woman got down to the basement, she said she felt a very heavy, persistent energy that she would need to clear out because it was like a black cloud down there. And I just found that really interesting to think that I was saying that it felt like there was something in the basement, that that's where this woman was stuck, and it felt like this residual dark energy from whatever had happened there or whatever had occurred on this land prior, whatever the case may be, there was something that needed to be cleansed out. And after a couple of times of this woman coming and cleansing out the house, slowly but surely all of my occurrences with this particular spirit subsided, and I was eventually able to live completely normal. With that being said, I never totally felt comfortable in the basement. I just felt better. I never totally felt okay being alone down there. I never totally felt okay like hanging out down there. But eventually, I slowly let go of the idea of anything being down there anymore. And eventually, I was able to spend time down there and not feel like I was being watched the whole entire time. Interestingly enough, I think the fact that this particular spirit was able to be cleansed out means that it may have either been a residual energy or it may have been just a very grumpy energy that was trapped there. But nonetheless, it was really spooky as a child. It's one of the few times that I was actually super afraid of a spirit or entity as a kid. I was really open-minded back then. I had so many experiences all the time that most times it didn't really faze me, but there was something about this woman spirit and there was something about that basement that gave me the most unsettling feeling ever. For arguments and skepticism's sake, I can say, and I will say, a lot of kids are afraid of basements, and I think the fact that there were so many spirits in my previous house basement and justified by many other individuals having experiences, maybe I did just associate basements with something. But I'd also never been afraid of the basement, really, only the laundry room in my previous home. So it was kind of off and odd to me that I was so afraid of this space. It could very well have just been myself scaring myself as a small child, but I remembered the hovering over the bed like yesterday. So whether or not I saw something and it's just been imprinted in my mind because I was so scared back then, or I really did have a paranormal experience, is up for debate, and I can completely see both sides of somebody who didn't experience it looking in on this story. I know I sound insane, but you are totally entitled to your own opinions. What do you guys think of this experience? Which side are you on? Do you believe I was scaring myself as a child, or do you think that there was in fact a spirit that needed to be cleansed out? let me know in the comments below, and that is it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed a more personal story time again. I've missed sharing my personal experiences with you guys, no matter how crazy they may sound. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much to Secret Escapes for sponsoring. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, make sure you go ahead and click that subscribe button. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, I love you guys.